Sarah's wedding day should have been perfect. The barn I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago glowed with fairy lights as 200 guests gathered to celebrate. My daughter looked radiant in her grandmother's restored wedding dress. Then Bradley, my new son-in-law, grabbed the microphone during his toast and announced that since I was getting too old to manage the 300-acre farm properly, it was time I handed over the deed. The champagne glass slipped from my trembling fingers and shattered on the floor. The morning sun cast long shadows across my farmland as I stood on the porch, coffee cup in hand, thinking about how we'd gotten here. 6 months ago, my life was simple. Just me, my 300-acre farm in rural Iowa, and my daughter Sarah, who'd visit every weekend from her veterinary practice in Des Moines. Everything changed the night she came home from that charity gala in Chicago. Her eyes sparkled in a way I hadn't seen since her mother passed 5 years ago. She couldn't stop talking about Bradley Ashworth, the charming real estate developer from Boston, who'd bid $20,000 just to have dinner with her at the auction. "Dad, he's incredible," she gushed, showing me photos on her phone. "He's sophisticated, successful, and he donated another $50,000 to the Children's Hospital after the gala ended." I studied the images of a tall, well-dressed man in his early 40s with perfectly styled salt and pepper hair and a smile that seemed practiced. Something in my gut twisted, but I pushed it aside. Sarah deserved happiness after spending so many years taking care of me after Mom's cancer battle. Bradley started visiting every weekend, flying in on his private plane. He'd arrive with armfuls of roses and designer gifts that made Sarah giggle like a teenager. During his first visit to the farm, he seemed fascinated by everything, especially the acreage. "This is remarkable, Finn," he said, surveying the fields from our highest hill. 300 acres of prime agricultural land. Must be worth a fortune with the way development is expanding from Des Moines. "Not interested in developing," I replied curtly. "This land has been in my family for 4 generations. It'll stay farmland." He laughed and slapped my back. Of course, I'm just impressed. Though at your age, managing all this must be exhausting. Ever think about retiring somewhere warm, Florida, maybe? I was only 67, and in better shape than most men 20 years younger thanks to a lifetime of farm work. His comment rubbed me wrong, but Sarah appeared just then with lemonade, and I let it slide. Over the following weeks, Bradley's interest in the farm became more pronounced. He'd ask about crop yields, soil quality, and water rights. He suggested I digitize all my records, even offering to have his assistant help. When I mentioned the farm was debt-free and I owned it outright, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "You should really have that in a trust," he advised. "Estate planning is crucial at your age. I know excellent lawyers who could set everything up to protect Sarah's inheritance." The proposal came after just 4 months. Bradley flew Sarah to Paris and proposed at the top of the Eiffel Tower with a ring that probably cost more than my yearly income. She called me crying with joy, and I forced enthusiasm into my voice, while that knot in my stomach grew tighter. "We want to get married at the farm." "Dad," Sarah said when they returned. "Bradley insists on a huge celebration. He wants to fly in everyone from his family and business associates, at least 200 people." "That's a lot of folks, sweetheart. You sure you don't want something smaller?" Bradley interjected, taking the phone from Sarah. "Finn, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Sarah deserves the absolute best. Don't worry about the cost. I'll cover everything." But he didn't. As wedding planning progressed, bills started arriving at the farm. Florists, caterers, rental companies, all sending invoices. When I questioned Bradley, he apologized profusely, claiming a mix-up with his accountant. He promised to reimburse everything after the wedding. Against my better judgment, I took out a loan against the farm to cover the mounting costs. $40,000 to give my only daughter the wedding of her dreams. I spent 18-hour days restoring the old barn installing new electrical systems, building a dance floor, and creating something magical. 3 nights before the wedding, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I'd been installing the last of the lights when I decided to rest in the hayloft. That's when I heard Bradley's voice below speaking on his phone. "Everything's set," he said. "After tomorrow, the old fool won't have a choice. Once I'm family, Sarah will convince him to sign everything over. She's already completely under my spell. The land surveys came back, Marcus. With the water rights and proximity to the interstate, we're looking at 30 million minimum once we subdivide for development." My blood ran cold. He continued talking, outlining plans to have me declared incompetent if I resisted. "The old man's a widower, no other family. Sarah's his weakness. 3 months maximum and we'll have the deed. Then we can move forward with the Chicago investors." I stayed frozen in that loft for an hour after he left, my mind racing. Every instinct screamed to confront him, to call off the wedding, to protect Sarah. But I needed proof. My word against his wouldn't be enough, especially with Sarah so deeply in love. That night, I made a decision that would either save my daughter or destroy our relationship forever. I just prayed I'd have enough time to expose the truth before Bradley succeeded in his plan. The wedding was in 48 hours, and I had work to do. The wedding morning arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of fresh-cut hay across the farm. I'd spent the previous 2 days fighting every instinct to confront Bradley directly, instead playing the role of the excited father while my mind raced with plans. Sarah had stayed at her friend Margaret's house the night before, following tradition. When she arrived at the farm that morning, her radiance nearly broke my resolve. She threw her arms around me, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Ah-ha! Ma-ha-ha! Can you believe it, Dad? In 6 hours, I'll be Mrs. Bradley Ashworth." "One time before it." I held her tight, memorizing the moment. "You look just like your mother on our wedding day." I managed my voice, thick with emotion I couldn't fully explain to her. The barn transformed throughout the morning as vendors arrived. White roses and baby's breath adorned every surface. Crystal chandeliers hung from beams I'd reinforced myself. Round tables with gold accents filled the space where I'd once stored tractors and hay bales. It was beautiful and extravagant, nothing like the simple family farm it usually was. Bradley's family began arriving around noon. They came in expensive cars with Massachusetts plates, dressed in designer clothes that seemed out of place in rural Iowa. I greeted them at the farmhouse, playing the gracious host while studying each interaction. His mother, Eleanor Ashworth, was a thin woman in her 70s with cold gray eyes and diamonds dripping from her ears. When I shook her hand, she barely made eye contact. "Charming little farm," she said, her Boston accent sharp as broken glass. "Bradley tells me you've managed to keep it profitable. Quite impressive in today's economy." "We do all right," I replied, noticing how she assessed the house like an appraiser. "Can I get you some sweet tea?" "I don't drink sugar." She sniffed, then walked past me without another word. The strange encounters continued. Bradley's cousin Thomas approached me near the barn, squinting in confusion. "Hey, weren't you at Marcus's wedding in Denver 2 years ago? I could swear I remember you. You were with that redhead, right?" "Never been to Denver," I said carefully. "And who's Marcus?" Thomas's face went pale. "Oh, I must be mistaken. Sorry, all these family weddings blur together." He hurried away before I could ask more questions. During the reception setup, I helped direct the catering staff while keeping my phone handy. Between tasks, I searched for Bradley Ashworth, Boston real estate developer. The results were sparse, mostly social media profiles created within the last year. No business website, no news articles about major deals, no professional history beyond vague LinkedIn connections. My unease grew when a young server dropped a tray near me and apologized profusely. As I helped her clean up, she kept staring at Bradley across the barn. "Everything okay?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, I'm sorry, it's just that man looks exactly like someone I used to work for in Kansas City. But his name was Marcus Brennan, and he vanished owing the restaurant staff 3 months of wages. Before I could respond, the catering manager called her away. I added Marcus Brennan, Kansas City to my mental list of things to investigate. The most unsettling moment came when Eleanor Ashworth cornered me in the barn while the photographer arranged family photos. She reeked of gin, despite it being barely 2 in the afternoon. "You seem like a decent man," she slurred, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "Better than the last few anyway." "Last few?" She laughed bitterly. "Oh, Bradley's quite the romantic, always falling in love with successful women. This is what his 4th engagement, 5th, I lose count." My heart hammered. "But you're his mother!" Her face twisted. Mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law technically. He was married to my Jessica for 3 years. Still uses the family name, the bastard. She died in a car accident. Her eyes hardened. Brake lines cut. Police said it was wear and tear, but I knew better. Bradley got her life insurance and disappeared. "Why are you here?" I managed to ask. "He pays me to play along. Cheaper than having me cause scenes, he says." She swayed slightly. "Your daughter seems sweet. Jessica was sweet too. So was Patricia and Linda." She wandered off before I could ask more, leaving me reeling. I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone, searching for Jessica Ashworth obituary. The results made my blood run cold. 3 years ago, a 32-year-old veterinarian named Jessica Ashworth died when her car went off a mountain road. She'd recently inherited a ranch from her grandmother worth several $1,000,000. Her husband Bradley was quoted in the article tearfully describing their perfect marriage. I searched Patricia and Linda with Bradley's name. More obituaries. More mysterious accidents. More inherited property that somehow vanished after their deaths. My hands shook as I realized what I'd discovered. My daughter wasn't marrying a real estate developer. She was marrying a serial killer who specialized in wealthy women with property. Sarah found me there, face white as paper, staring at my phone. "Dad, what's wrong? We need you for photos." I forced a smile. "Just checking the weather for tomorrow, sweetheart. Want to make sure your big day is perfect." She kissed my cheek. "It already is, Dad. Bradley's everything I ever dreamed of." That's what terrified me most. As she led me to the photo session, I noticed something else that made my spine tingle. Mixed among the wedding guests were 3 men who didn't fit. They stood at strategic points around the barn, wearing suits that didn't quite conceal the bulges at their hips. They weren't mingling, weren't drinking, just watching, waiting. Bradley had brought muscle to my daughter's wedding. During the photos, I stood beside the man who planned to murder my daughter, smiled for the cameras, and silently vowed he wouldn't live long enough to hurt her. But first, I needed irrefutable proof. Sarah's life depended on my ability to play this game better than a man who'd apparently won it at least 3 times before. The text message on Sarah's phone that I glimpsed during a quiet moment confirmed my worst fears. From Bradley to someone saved as Chicago Group. Phase 1 complete. The old man's farm will be ours within 6 months. Start lining up the offshore buyers. There was no more time for investigation. Tomorrow, Bradley would demand my farm in front of everyone, and I'd have to be ready. The trap was set, but I wasn't the only hunter preparing for the kill. The question was whether I could spring mine before he sprang his. The reception began as the sun painted golden streaks across the Iowa sky. 200 guests filled the barn, their laughter and conversation echoing off the restored beams. I stood near the entrance greeting arrivals, while keeping track of Bradley's 3 stationed men. They'd positioned themselves at the main exit and both side doors, trying to look casual while their eyes swept the crowd. Sarah floated between tables in her grandmother's dress, altered to fit her perfectly. The ivory silk caught the light from the chandeliers I'd installed, making her glow like an angel. Bradley stayed close to her, his hand possessively on her lower back. That practiced smile, never wavering. The dinner service went smoothly. Prime rib and roasted vegetables from our own garden prepared by the nervous caterers who kept glancing at Bradley like they'd seen a ghost. I gave the father's toast, keeping it short, and focusing on Sarah's kindness, her strength after losing her mother, her dedication to healing animals. I didn't mention Bradley once, which earned me a sharp look from him. Then came his turn. Bradley stood tapping his champagne glass with a silver spoon. The room quieted, and I noticed his 3 men shift position slightly, moving closer to the exits. Friends, family, beloved guests. He began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. Today I married the most extraordinary woman in the world. Sarah has brought light into my life in ways I never imagined possible. Appropriate awes and applause rippled through the crowd. Sarah beamed up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. But I must speak about another remarkable person here today, Bradley continued, gesturing toward me. Finn Morrison, my new father-in-law, a man who has single-handedly maintained this beautiful farm for decades, a testament to hard work and dedication. I tensed, knowing where this was heading. Several guests smiled and nodded, raising glasses in my direction. Bradley's tone shifted, becoming concerned, sympathetic. However, those of us who truly care about Finn have noticed the toll these years have taken. At 67, managing 300 acres alone is simply too much. Sarah and I have watched him struggle, forgetting appointments, mixing up financial records, pushing himself to exhaustion. Bradley, Sarah whispered, tugging at his sleeve. This wasn't part of any speech they'd rehearsed. He patted her hand condescendingly. It's okay, darling. These things need to be addressed. He turned back to the crowd. Which is why, out of love and concern for Finn's well-being, I've prepared documents to transfer the farm's management to younger, more capable hands. Mine. Gasps echoed through the barn. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. The local farmers present knew damn well I could work circles around men half my age. Bradley reached inside his jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio. I have here a simple transfer of deed already reviewed by my attorneys. All it needs is Finn's signature, and we can ensure this land is protected and properly managed while Finn enjoys a well-deserved retirement. My neighbor Jim started to stand face red with indignation, but his wife pulled him back down. The tension in the room thickened like morning fog. Bradley, what are you doing? Sarah's voice cracked. We never discussed this. Sometimes, sweetheart, we must act in our loved ones' best interests, even when they can't see it themselves. He opened the portfolio, revealing official-looking documents. Finn, would you please come up here? Let's handle this as a family with all our friends as witnesses. I stood slowly, feeling 200 pairs of eyes on me. Each step toward the head table felt like walking through molasses. Bradley's men tensed, ready for resistance. That's very thoughtful of you, Bradley, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I'm not signing anything today. This is Sarah's wedding. Let's focus on celebrating. His jaw tightened. Finn, be reasonable. You're exhausted. Sarah tells me you've been working 18-hour days. At your age, that's dangerous. Sign the papers and you can rest knowing everything's taken care of. I said no. The mask finally slipped. Bradley's face flushed, veins bulging in his neck. You stubborn old fool, do you have any idea what this land is worth? What could be done with it? You're sitting on $30 million of development potential, and you're too ignorant to see it. Sarah stood, her dress rustling. Bradley, stop this right now. He whirled on her. Stay out of this, Sarah. Your father's going senile. Someone needs to make the hard decisions. That's when I laughed. Actually laughed. Senile son. I may be 67, but I know a con when I see one. How much debt have you already racked up against my farm without my knowledge? How many forged documents have you filed? The entire room went silent. Bradley's face transformed from red to purple. You ungrateful bastard. He snarled, abandoning all pretense of charm. "I'm offering you a graceful exit. Take it, or I'll have you declared incompetent by Monday. I have doctors who'll swear you're suffering from dementia. Sarah will support it to protect you from yourself." "I will not," Sarah cried, mascara running down her cheeks. Bradley grabbed my arm, his fingers digging deep enough to bruise. "Sign the papers, old man. Now." I looked him straight in the eye. No. The slap came fast and hard. Bradley's palm connected with my cheek with a crack that echoed through the barn. The force sent me stumbling backward, though I managed to stay upright. Women screamed. Men shouted. Sarah's wedding bouquet hit Bradley in the face as she threw it at him. "How dare you!" she shrieked. "How dare you hit my father!" I touched my stinging cheek, feeling the heat radiate from the impact. Around us, chaos erupted. Jim and several other local farmers stood ready to defend me. Bradley's 3 men moved forward, hands reaching inside their jackets. Some guests pulled out phones, either calling police or recording the scene. Bradley stood there, chest heaving, finally showing his true nature to everyone. The sophisticated businessman was gone, replaced by a cornered predator. "You'll regret this," he hissed at me. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I straightened my jacket and looked at my daughter's devastated face, then back at the man who'd planned to murder her. "Actually, Bradley, or should I say Marcus, I know exactly who I'm dealing with." His face went white at the name Marcus. "If you'll excuse me." I continued calmly. "I need to make a phone call. Sarah, sweetheart, maybe you should sit down. This is about to get very interesting." I walked toward the barn exit, noting how Bradley's men moved to intercept me. But Jim and 5 other farmers formed a protective wall around me. These were men I'd known for 40 years, men who'd helped me bury my wife, who'd shared equipment and labor through good seasons and bad. They weren't about to let hired muscle intimidate one of their own. "Let him pass," Jim growled, all 6 feet 4 inches of corn-fed Iowa farmer. "Unless you boys want to find out how we handle troublemakers in these parts." The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. Bradley's men looked to him for guidance, but he stood frozen, processing that I'd called him Marcus. I made it outside, pulling my phone from my pocket with steady hands, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The contact I needed was saved simply as Phoenix. As the phone rang, I could hear the commotion building inside the barn, voices raised in anger and confusion. "Mr. Morrison," a calm female voice answered. "We're already in position. Did he assault you as predicted?" "Yes, in front of 200 witnesses. Many recorded it." "Excellent. We'll be there in 3 minutes. Keep him talking if possible." I ended the call and looked back at the barn, my barn built by my grandfather and maintained by generations of Morrisons. Bradley Ashworth, or Marcus Brennan, or whoever he really was, had made a fatal error. He'd assumed that because I was old and rural, I was also stupid and helpless. He was about to learn that Iowa farmers didn't survive decades of droughts, floods, and market crashes by being either of those things. We survived by being prepared for anything, including predators dressed in expensive suits who thought they could steal what we'd spent lifetimes building. The trap was sprung. Now I just had to keep everyone alive long enough for justice to arrive. I stood outside the barn, the cool evening air helping to clear my head, while chaos continued erupting inside. Through the windows, I could see Bradley gesturing wildly, trying to regain control of the narrative, while Sarah sat at the head table surrounded by her bridesmaids. My cheek still throbbed from his slap, but I'd taken harder hits from ornery bulls over the years. Jim emerged from the barn, followed by 2 more farmers. "You okay, Finn? That son of a bitch needs a lesson in manners." "I'm fine," I assured him. "But I need you boys to keep people calm in there. Don't let anyone leave, and definitely don't let Bradley or his men near Sarah. Can you do that?" "Consider it done." Jim cracked his knuckles. "Been a while since we had a good barn fight. Kind of miss the old days." They headed back inside, and I walked to my pickup truck parked behind the farmhouse. The old Ford had seen better days, but I'd modified it over the years with various hiding spots. Behind the rear seat, welded into the frame, was a locked steel box that even Sarah didn't know about. I opened it and pulled out a thick manila folder. The private investigator's report was comprehensive with photos, documents, and sworn affidavits. Everything Phoenix Security had uncovered in the past 3 weeks laid out in devastating detail. 3 weeks ago, after overhearing Bradley's phone call, I'd driven to Des Moines at dawn. Phoenix Security operated from a nondescript office building downtown. I'd found them through my attorney, who'd mentioned they specialized in asset protection and fraud investigation for agricultural clients. The lead investigator, Rebecca Stone, was a former FBI agent who'd grown tired of bureaucracy. She listened to my story without interruption, taking notes in precise handwriting. "Mr. Morrison," she'd said, "when I finished, what you're describing sounds like a serial marriage fraud scheme. These are more common than people realize, especially targeting widowed or divorced individuals with significant assets. If your suspicions are correct, your daughter is in serious danger." "Can you prove it?" I'd asked. "Give me 72 hours for preliminary investigation. If I find what I expect, we'll need to move fast. These types often accelerate their plans when they sense scrutiny." Those 72 hours had been the longest of my life. I'd continued playing the excited father of the bride, while Rebecca's team dug into Bradley Ashworth's past. What they found exceeded my worst nightmares. Bradley Ashworth didn't exist before 2019. The identity was constructed using stolen social security numbers and forged documents. His real name was Marcus Brennan, and before that, Mitchell Bergman, and before that, Martin Bishop. Each identity corresponded to a dead wife and stolen assets. Jessica Ashworth, the woman Eleanor claimed was her daughter, had inherited a $2 million ranch. Dead within a year of marriage, brake lines severed. Patricia Holbrook had owned a chain of successful restaurants. Dead from a suspicious fall downstairs, leaving everything to her grieving husband, Mitchell. Linda Chen had been a tech executive with stock options worth millions, poisoned by accidentally ingesting peanuts despite no previous allergy. There were others going back 15 years, always wealthy women with property or businesses, always tragic accidents within 18 months of marriage, always the husband disappearing with the assets shortly after. Phoenix Security had also uncovered his current legal marriage to a woman in Nevada named Dorothy Fitzgerald. She was 8 months pregnant and had been searching for her missing husband for 4 months. He'd vanished after she'd refused to add him to the deed of her father's casino. The evidence was overwhelming, but what made it actionable was Bradley's mistake in taking out fraudulent loans against my farm. He'd forged my signature on documents claiming I'd agreed to develop the land using those papers to secure lines of credit from 3 different banks. The FBI took forgery and bank fraud seriously, especially when it crossed state lines. Rebecca had coordinated with federal marshals, state police, and the FBI. They'd been building a case waiting for Bradley to make an overt move that would justify immediate arrest. Assaulting me at the wedding in front of witnesses was the gift they'd been hoping for. I tucked the folder under my arm and walked back toward the barn. As predicted, Bradley had made another crucial error. He'd brought his own security team, but they were just hired muscle from Chicago, not professionals. They had no idea their employer was a federal fugitive with multiple identities. Through the barn windows, I could see the situation deteriorating. Bradley had given up on charm, entirely shouting at guests who were trying to leave. His 3 men had blocked the exits, creating a hostage situation, whether he intended it or not. Several people were on phones, undoubtedly calling police. Perfect, more documentation of his crimes. I re-entered through a side door, immediately noticing how the atmosphere had shifted from wedding celebration to barely contained panic. Tables were overturned. The beautiful flower arrangements lay scattered across the floor. The wedding cake had somehow ended up smashed against a wall. Bradley spotted me immediately, his face contorted with rage as he stormed over his men flanking him. "You think you're clever, old man?" he snarled. "One phone call to my lawyers and I'll have you committed. Sarah will sign papers giving me power of attorney to protect her dear, demented father. Either way, I get that land." I smiled, which seemed to infuriate him more. "Marcus, can I call you Marcus? I'm curious about something. Did you really think I'd just hand over my family's legacy to a stranger who appeared 6 months ago?" He grabbed my shirt collar. "My name is Bradley." "No, it's not." I held up the folder. "It's Marcus Brennan. Before that, Mitchell Bergman. Before that, Martin Bishop. Should I continue? I have 15 years of aliases documented here." His grip loosened as blood drained from his face. Behind him, his security team exchanged uncertain looks. "That's right," I continued conversationally. "Phoenix Security does thorough work. They found Jessica, Patricia, Linda, and all the others. They found Dorothy too, your current wife, the pregnant one in Nevada you abandoned." "You're lying," he whispered, but his confidence was crumbling. "Am I check your phone? I bet you have some interesting messages from your Chicago investors wondering why the FBI is asking questions about your land development scheme." He released me and pulled out his phone fingers, trembling as he scrolled through messages. Whatever he read made him stagger. That's when we heard the sirens. Multiple sirens growing louder, converging on the farm from different directions. Through the barn's open doors, red and blue lights began painting the walls. "You called the cops." Bradley Horst Marcus laughed desperately. "For what a family disagreement, a slap, I'll be out on bail in an hour." "I didn't call local police," I said. "I called Phoenix Security 3 weeks ago. They called the FBI, the U.S. Marshals Service, and the Iowa State Police. You're not getting arrested for slapping me, Marcus. You're getting arrested for murder, fraud, forgery, bigamy, and about 20 other federal crimes." The barn doors burst open. Federal agents in tactical gear poured in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Bradley's security team immediately dropped to their knees, hands behind their heads. They were thugs, not idiots. Bradley himself stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed world collapse. Sarah had risen from her chair, supported by her bridesmaids, staring at the man she'd married with dawning horror. Rebecca Stone entered behind the tactical team, dressed in a conservative suit, her FBI credentials displayed prominently. She looked exactly as I remembered, professional, competent, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting innocent people. "Marcus Brennan," she announced, her voice carrying across the barn. "You're under arrest for interstate fraud, forgery, identity theft, bigamy, and conspiracy to commit murder. We'll be adding more charges as the investigation continues." That's when Bradley made his last mistake. He lunged for Sarah, probably thinking a hostage would give him leverage. He'd taken 2 steps when I clotheslined him with a forearm across the throat, a move I'd perfected wrestling steers in my youth. He hit the barn floor hard, gasping for air. Federal agents swarmed him, cuffs clicking into place as they hauled him to his feet. The entire barn watched in stunned silence as the sophisticated Boston real estate developer was revealed as a serial killer who preyed on successful women. Otto Finn Morrison. Bradley wheezed as they dragged him past me. "You've destroyed everything." "No, son," I replied calmly. "You destroyed everything the moment you decided my daughter would be your next victim. I just made sure you'd face justice for it." As they let him out, I heard a commotion near the entrance. A very pregnant woman pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with fury. Dorothy Fitzgerald had arrived, driven by federal agents who thought she deserved to see her husband's arrest. "Marcus!" she screamed. "You bastard, you left me pregnant and broke. You stole everything." Bradley's eyes widened in panic as he recognized her. The agents paused, perhaps feeling she deserved this moment. Dorothy didn't waste it. She slapped him harder than he'd hit me, her hand leaving a bright red mark on his other cheek. "That's for our baby, you pathetic excuse for a man." The guests erupted in spontaneous applause as the agents finally dragged Bradley away. But we weren't done yet. Not even close. Rebecca Stone approached me, a slight smile on her professional face. "Mr. Morrison, we'll need statements from you, your daughter, and several guests. But first, I think there are some people here who need to hear the full truth about who they've been protecting." She was looking at Eleanor Ashworth and the rest of Bradley's fake family. The night was far from over, and the revelations were just beginning. Rebecca Stone commanded the barn's attention with the natural authority of someone who'd spent decades in law enforcement. The tactical team had secured Bradley's 3 hired men, who sat zip-tied near the entrance, looking like they deeply regretted their life choices. The wedding guests remained frozen in place, processing the surreal transformation of a celebration into a crime scene. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rebecca announced, "I'm Special Investigator Stone with Phoenix Security, working in conjunction with federal law enforcement. What you've witnessed tonight is the culmination of a 3-week investigation into one of the most prolific marriage fraud schemes we've encountered." She gestured to several agents setting up recording equipment. "We'll need statements from many of you, but first there are additional arrests to be made." Eleanor Ashworth tried to slip toward the side door, but found an agent blocking her path. Her sophisticated facade cracked as she realized the trap extended beyond Bradley. "Mrs. Ashworth," Rebecca called out, "or should I say Mrs. Jennifer Crosby, please remain where you are." Eleanor's face went pale beneath her expensive makeup. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then let me refresh your memory." Rebecca continued, pulling out a tablet. "You've been impersonating Bradley's mother at his fraudulent weddings for 6 years. You were Jessica Ashworth's actual mother-in-law, and after her death, Bradley recruited you to play his mother for future cons. You've been paid $75,000 per performance." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah's bridesmaids held her tighter as each revelation hit like a physical blow. "The gentleman calling himself Cousin Thomas." Rebecca pointed to the man who'd mentioned Denver earlier. "Real name Tony Valdez, professional actor from Los Angeles. He's played various relatives at 4 different weddings. His acting resume is quite impressive, though I doubt he'll be listing these performances." Tony slumped in his chair, caught between humiliation and relief that the charade was over. One by one, Rebecca exposed the entire fake family. The distinguished uncle from Martha's Vineyard was actually a casino dealer from Atlantic City who owed Bradley gambling debts. The sweet grandmother was a retired escort Bradley had hired through an agency. Every single relative was either an actor, an accomplice, or someone Bradley had leverage over. "But here's where it gets interesting," Rebecca said, her voice hardening. "Some of you weren't just playing parts. You were active participants in the murders." She nodded to her team, who moved to arrest 3 specific individuals: Bradley's supposed business partner, his personal physician, and a woman who'd been introduced as his sister. "Dr. Harold Simmons," Rebecca announced as they cuffed the physician. "You provided the drugs used to sedate victims before their accidents. You also signed false medical documents claiming Finn Morrison showed signs of dementia, papers Bradley planned to use if tonight's confrontation went differently." The doctor said nothing, his hands shaking as agents led him away. "Monica Brennan, Bradley's actual sister and only real family member here. You helped forge the loan documents against Mr. Morrison's farm. You also assisted in hiding assets stolen from previous victims. We have your signature on dozens of fraudulent papers." Monica spit in my direction as they dragged her past. "He promised us millions. You ruined everything, you stupid hick." "And Vincent Caruso," Rebecca concluded, indicating the business partner. "You arranged the accidents. Jessica's brake lines, Patricia's staircase, Linda's poisoned food. You're the one who made their murders look accidental." Vincent, a thin man with dead eyes, simply shrugged. "I want a lawyer." As the arrests continued, I noticed Sarah had gone silent, her face a mask of shock. I moved toward her, but Rebecca caught my arm. "There's more, Mr. Morrison. We found something during our investigation that Sarah needs to know." She pulled up images on her tablet showing a timeline of Bradley's activities over the past 6 months. Bradley didn't randomly meet Sarah at that charity gala. He'd been stalking her for 3 months prior, learning her routines, her interests, her vulnerabilities. He knew she'd be at that event and paid to be seated at her table. Sarah made a small, wounded sound. He researched your entire family history, Rebecca continued. He knew about your wife's death, your farm's value, and most importantly, that Sarah was your only heir. She was selected as a target because of your assets, Mr. Morrison, not despite them. The gifts, Sarah whispered, speaking for the first time since the arrests began. All those thoughtful gifts that showed he really understood me. He hired a private investigator to learn your preferences, Rebecca said gently. Every romantic gesture was calculated manipulation based on surveillance reports. I finally reached my daughter, wrapping her in my arms, as she began to sob. The wedding dress that had made her look so radiant now seemed like a costume in a play she hadn't known she was performing in. There's one more thing, Rebecca said, her tone suggesting the worst was yet to come. Mr. Morrison, we found evidence that Bradley had already begun implementing his endgame. The loan documents he forged against your farm were just the beginning. She showed me financial records on her tablet. My blood ran cold as I read them. He took out a $2 million life insurance policy on you last week, Rebecca explained. The beneficiary is listed as Sarah, but buried in the fine print is a clause that would transfer benefits to her spouse in case of her incapacitation. He was going to kill us both, I said, the full horror sinking in. Make it look like a murder-suicide or an accident that got us both. The forensic accountants found more, Rebecca added. He'd already started the process of having you declared mentally incompetent. Dr. Simmons had prepared evaluations claiming you showed violent tendencies and paranoid delusions. After tonight's confrontation where you publicly accused him of being a fraud, he planned to use that as evidence of your declining mental state. I thought about how perfectly I'd played into his hands by laughing at him by calling him Marcus. If I hadn't had Phoenix Security investigating, if I hadn't known the truth, his plan might have worked. The grieving widower act he'd perfected would have fooled everyone. But you knew, Sarah said suddenly, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. You knew and you let the wedding continue. You let me marry him. I needed proof, sweetheart. Your word against his wouldn't have been enough, not with how deep his hooks were in you. And I needed him to reveal himself publicly, to show everyone his true nature. So you used me as bait. I used myself as bait. I knew he'd go after the farm at the wedding. It's what predators like him do. They want witnesses to their power plays. I just made sure the right witnesses were here when he did it. Rebecca cleared her throat. Actually, Mr. Morrison's cooperation was crucial to saving not just your lives, but potentially future victims. The evidence we gathered these past 3 weeks, combined with tonight's recorded confession and assault, ensures Marcus Brennan will never hurt anyone again. The barn had grown quiet, except for the scratch of pens as agents took statements from guests. The fairy lights I'd strung still twinkled overhead, casting beautiful shadows over an ugly reality. I need to know, Sarah said quietly. Was any of it real? Did he feel anything genuine for me? Rebecca's silence was answer enough. I held my daughter tighter as she grieved for a love that had never existed, for a future built on lies, for the innocent trust that had been weaponized against her. Around us, the remnants of Bradley's criminal enterprise were being systematically dismantled and documented. But in that moment, none of that mattered as much as the broken heart of the woman who'd walked down the aisle in her grandmother's dress, believing she'd found her happily ever after. The trap had worked perfectly, catching a monster who'd prowled among us disguised as Prince Charming. But victory felt hollow when purchased with my daughter's pain. All I could do was hold her and promise that this darkness would pass, that real love still existed, that not everyone who seemed too good to be true actually was. Outside, they loaded Bradley into a federal transport vehicle. Through the barn doors, I saw him staring back at us with naked hatred. He'd lost his freedom, his carefully constructed identity, and his latest score. But Sarah had lost something too, her ability to trust freely, to love without suspicion, to believe in fairy tale endings. Some prices were too high, even for justice. The hours that followed Bradley's arrest blurred together like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Federal agents transformed my barn into a makeshift investigation center with laptops and recording equipment spread across the tables meant for wedding guests. One by one, people gave their statements while Sarah and I waited in the farmhouse, surrounded by the detritus of what should have been the happiest day of her life. Margaret, Sarah's maid of honor, stayed with us, brewing pot after pot of coffee with shaking hands. "I knew something was off about him," she kept muttering. "The way he'd steer you away from your friends, how he always had to know where you were. I should have said something." "We all should have," I replied, though the words tasted like ash. The red flags seemed so obvious now, painted bright as blood in hindsight's harsh light. Around midnight, Rebecca Stone knocked on the door. She looked exhausted but satisfied, like a hunter after a successful but difficult kill. "We need you both back in the barn," she said. "There are some things you need to see, and some people who want to talk to you." Sarah had changed out of her wedding dress into jeans and one of her mother's old sweaters. She looked younger, somehow, more like the girl who used to help me feed chickens than the woman who'd said, "I do," just hours earlier. The barn had been transformed again. The romantic lighting was replaced by harsh portable floods that left no shadows for secrets to hide in. Most of the guests had gone home, but about 30 people remained, including some faces I didn't recognize. Mr. Morrison, Sarah. Rebecca began gesturing to a small group near the damaged wedding cake. "These are some of the people we contacted during our investigation. They wanted to be here when Bradley was arrested to see justice finally served." A woman in her 50s stepped forward first. She had steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much pain. "I'm Patricia's sister Ruth. Patricia Holbrook, who died falling down the stairs 3 years ago." Her voice cracked. "She called me the night before she died, said she'd found out something terrible about her husband Mitchell. That was the name he used then. She was going to leave him, but she never got the chance." Sarah reached out instinctively, taking Ruth's hands in hers. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry, honey. Be grateful. Your father saved your life." Next came a young man, maybe 25, with features that looked vaguely Asian despite his farmer's tan. "I'm Linda Chen's nephew, David. Aunt Linda was the smartest person I knew, built her tech company from nothing. Then she met Martin Bishop at a conference and fell hard. 6 months later, she was dead from an allergic reaction to peanuts. She'd been carrying an EpiPen for 20 years, never went anywhere without it. Funny how it disappeared that night. One by one, they shared their stories. Brothers, sisters, children, and friends of Bradley's victims. Each tale followed the same pattern: a successful woman with assets, a whirlwind romance with a charming stranger, a quick wedding, and then death disguised as tragedy. "We formed a support group," Ruth explained. "Started comparing notes, realizing the similarities. We've been tracking him for 2 years, always one step behind. He'd vanish after each death emerged somewhere new with a different name and story. We tried to warn Sarah, actually. Sent anonymous letters, left messages, but I thought they were from jealous exes or crazy people." Sarah finished, her face stricken. "Bradley said he had stalkers from his business dealings. I actually gave him the letters to handle." "He was always good at spinning stories," said Eleanor Ashworth, or rather Jennifer Crosby, who sat handcuffed at a nearby table. The FBI had decided to interview her in front of everyone, perhaps as a kindness to the victims' families. "Tell them about Jessica," Rebecca prompted. Jennifer's carefully maintained facade finally crumbled entirely. "Jessica was my daughter, my only child. She met Bradley at an equestrian event. He claimed to be a fellow horse enthusiast. She was so happy, said she'd finally found someone who understood her passion for animals." She paused, gathering strength. "The night she died, she called me. Said she'd found out Bradley had sold 2 of her horses without telling her, forged her signature on the bills of sale. She was going to confront him, maybe leave him. 2 hours later, the police called. Her car had gone off Mountain View Road. "So, why help him?" Sarah asked, her voice small but steady. "Why help the man who killed your daughter?" Jennifer laughed bitterly. "He came to me after the funeral, all tears and devastation. Said Jessica had been unstable suicidal, that he'd tried to get her help. He had documents, therapy notes signed by that Dr. Simmons, making her look crazy. Then he showed me pictures. Fake pictures, but I didn't know that then, of Jessica with other men. He made me believe my daughter was someone I didn't recognize." She looked directly at Sarah. "By the time I realized the truth, I was in too deep. He had recordings of me admitting I knew Jessica was unstable, that I'd hidden her mental health issues. He said if I didn't help him, he'd make sure I was charged as an accomplice in insurance fraud. So I became Eleanor Ashworth, the perfect mother for the perfect son." "How many?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "How many weddings did you attend?" 4, including tonight. San Diego, Denver, Houston, and here. Each time I watched him marry another woman, knowing what would happen. I told myself maybe this time would be different. Maybe he actually loved this one." She met Sarah's eyes. "I almost warned you during the photographs. You reminded me so much of Jessica, but I was a coward." The revelation hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Then Dorothy Fitzgerald Bradley's legal wife waddled forward, one hand supporting her enormous belly. "I want to thank you, Mr. Morrison," she said. "If you hadn't stopped him tonight, I'd be raising this baby alone while believing his lies about a business emergency. Now at least I know the truth. I can file for divorce, reclaim what he stole, and make sure my child never knows their father was a monster." "What did he steal from you?" Sarah asked. "Only everything that mattered. My father left me his casino in Reno worth about $8 million. Bradley convinced me to sign papers for tax purposes, he said. Really, he was transferring ownership to shell companies. If he hadn't gotten greedy and come after your farm, he'd have disappeared with everything once the baby was born. Probably would have staged my death too, made it look like complications from childbirth." The systematic nature of Bradley's crimes became clearer with each testimony. He wasn't just a con man or even a simple murderer. He was a serial predator who viewed successful women as prey, their achievements and assets as his rightful plunder. The fact that he destroyed lives seemed incidental to him, collateral damage in his pursuit of wealth. "There's something else," Rebecca announced, pulling up financial records on a large screen they'd set up. "We've traced Bradley's assets through various shell companies and hidden accounts. Over 15 years, he's stolen approximately $42 million from his victims. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is working to recover what they can." "Will the families get anything back?" David Chen asked. "Some, possibly. But Bradley was smart about spending. Fast cars, private jets, gambling, maintaining his false identities, paying accomplices like his sister and Vincent. We estimate he burned through $30 million. What's left is scattered across offshore accounts that will take years to unravel." I thought about the $40,000 I'd borrowed for this wedding, the loan I'd have to repay for a celebration that had become a crime scene. It seemed like such a small amount compared to what others had lost. Sarah suddenly stood, swaying slightly. "I need to see him." "Sarah, no," I started, but she cut me off. "I need to see him, Dad. I need to look him in the eye, knowing what he really is. I need to ask him something." Rebecca considered this, then nodded. "He's in federal custody in the mobile unit outside. I can arrange 5 minutes, but you'll be separated by security glass, and agents will be present. I'm coming with her," I said, brooking no argument. We followed Rebecca out of the barn past the spot where Bradley had slapped me just hours earlier. The federal transport was a modified bus with holding cells parked near my grain silo. Inside, behind reinforced plexiglass, sat the man who'd nearly destroyed my family. Bradley had been stripped of his wedding finery, now wearing an orange jumpsuit that made his skin look sallow. His perfect hair was mussed, his confident smile replaced by a sneer. When he saw Sarah, something flickered in his eyes. Not remorse, but annoyance, like she was a deal that had fallen through. "Come to gloat?" he asked, his voice still carrying that practiced charm even behind bars. Sarah stepped closer to the glass. "I came to ask you something. When you proposed in Paris on top of the Eiffel Tower, and you cried when I said yes, were those real tears?" He laughed, an ugly sound in the confined space. "You want to know if I loved you, if any of it was real? God, you're all the same. Every single mark, always asking the same pathetic question." "Don't call my daughter a mark," I growled. "What else was she? A target, a score, a means to an end? You think you're special, Sarah? You were just number 9. Maybe 10, I lose count. Another lonely woman with daddy's money, desperate for someone to see her as more than a bank account." Sarah flinched but held her ground. So the tears were fake. Everything was fake, you stupid girl. The tears, the romance, the man you thought you married. Bradley Ashworth doesn't exist. He's a character I created tailored specifically to your pathetic need for a fairy tale. You think you were hard to manipulate, you practically gift-wrapped yourself for me. "That's enough," Rebecca said, but Sarah raised her hand. "No, let him talk. I want to hear it all." Bradley leaned forward, his eyes glittering with malice. "You want the truth? Fine. You were one of the easiest marks I ever played. Dead mother, overprotective father, desperate to prove you could make your own choices. All I had to do was show up with flowers and pretend to listen to your boring stories about sick puppies, and you couldn't sign that marriage license fast enough. And the farm, I asked, though I already knew the answer, was going to be demolished within 6 months. Already had buyers lined up for 42 luxury homes. Your precious family legacy would have made me millions while you rotted in some nursing home too senile to remember your own name. At least that's what the paperwork would have said." Sarah's composure finally cracked. "I loved you. And that's why you deserved everything that was coming to you," Bradley snarled. "Love makes you weak, makes you blind. Your father's the only one in your pathetic family with any brains, and even he almost waited too long. 5 more minutes at that reception, and my men would have made sure he never made that phone call. That's when I understood the full scope of how close we'd come to disaster. The slap hadn't been Bradley losing control. It had been calculated to provoke me into storming out alone where his men could intercept me. If Jim and the others hadn't formed that protective wall, if I hadn't made it to my truck." "We're done here," Rebecca said, firmly signaling the transport guards. As they prepared to drive Bradley to federal detention, he called out one last time. "Hey, Finn. You think you won? I've got lawyers who'll have me out in 10 years. Maybe I'll come visit the farm when I'm free. See what you've done with the place." I turned back, meeting his eyes through the glass. "No, son, you won't. See, while you were playing dress-up as Bradley Ashworth, I was talking to every family you destroyed. They'll all be at every parole hearing, making sure you serve every single day. And if by some miracle you do get out while I'm still breathing, you'll find I've turned this farm into a sanctuary for women recovering from men like you. Your legacy won't be the millions you stole or the lives you took. It'll be the shelter that exists because you showed us what evil looks like in an expensive suit." His face contorted with rage, but I was done listening. Sarah and I walked back to the barn where the families of his victims still waited. There was more to be done, more statements to give, more truth to uncover. But in that moment, I just held my daughter as she cried for the last time over a man who had never existed. The moon hung full and bright over the farm, illuminating the land that had nearly been stolen by a phantom in a tuxedo. But we'd survived. Scarred, wiser and warier, but still standing. Sometimes that's the best victory you can hope for when evil comes calling in the form of love. 5 years have passed since my daughter's wedding became a federal crime scene. I'm 72 now, still working the farm, though I've hired help these days. Not because I need it, but because the Morrison family farm has become something bigger than just my legacy. The morning after Bradley's arrest, I woke to find news vans lining the road to my property. "Father saves daughter from Black Widow groom," screamed the headlines. Wedding sting Operation Nab's serial killer. Within hours, the story went national, then international. My phone rang off the hook with interview requests, book deals, movie offers. I turned them all down. Sarah and I had been through enough without reliving it for entertainment. But the media attention brought unexpected gifts. Letters poured in from around the world, women and men sharing their own stories of predators disguised as partners. Many included donations, small amounts with big hearts behind them. Use this to help someone else, they'd write. Make sure no one else falls for a Bradley. Sarah struggled those first months. She moved back to the farmhouse, barely ate, couldn't work. The woman who'd saved countless animals couldn't save herself from the poison of betrayal. She'd lie in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Bradley, searching for signs she'd missed. How do I trust anyone again? She asked me one morning over coffee. How do I know the next person isn't playing a role? I didn't have easy answers. Trust once shattered doesn't rebuild quickly or completely. But I told her what my father told me after we lost cattle to a neighbor's deliberate poisoning. You don't let one rabid dog turn you against all dogs. You just learn to watch for foam at the mouth. Slowly, Sarah began to heal. She started with small steps, returning to her veterinary practice part-time. Her first day back, her colleagues had decorated her office with pictures of every animal she'd ever saved, a reminder that her compassion had created real good in the world. She stood there crying, but they were cleaner tears than before. The trial took 2 years to complete. Bradley, whose real name turned out to be Marcus Brandon Walsh, faced federal charges in 4 states. Murder was harder to prove without bodies exhumed, but fraud, forgery, identity theft, bigamy, and conspiracy charges stacked up like cordwood. Each victim's family testified, painting a picture of a predator who'd turned love into a weapon. Sarah testified on a cold February morning. She wore our mother's pearl necklace and spoke with quiet dignity about falling in love with an illusion. He studied me like I was a test to pass, she said. Every gesture of affection was calculated to generate a specific response. I wasn't a person to him. I was a problem to solve, and the solution was my father's farm. Bradley's defense team tried to paint him as a troubled man who'd never actually killed anyone, just someone who got in over his head with lies. But when Vincent Caruso flipped for a reduced sentence, he provided detailed accounts of how they'd staged the accidents. The brake lines cut with precision, the staircase weakened just enough, the EpiPen hidden, while Linda Chen gasped for air. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Life without parole. Bradley screamed obscenities as they dragged him away, promising vengeance on everyone who'd wronged him. But his threats rang hollow from a man who'd spend his remaining days in a federal supermax prison. Dorothy Fitzgerald gave birth to a healthy boy she named Charlie, after her father. She sent us pictures occasionally. The boy had his mother's kind eyes, and thankfully nothing of his father's cruel charm. Dorothy rebuilt her life and her casino business, eventually remarrying a pediatrician who adopted Charlie as his own. Monica Brennan and Dr. Simmons got 20 years each. Jennifer Crosby received 5 years for her role as Eleanor Ashworth, though the judge considered her victimization by Bradley. She writes Sarah letters sometimes full of apologies and memories of her real daughter Jessica. Sarah reads them but hasn't written back. Some wounds need more time. As for the farm, it transformed into something beautiful from the ashes of that terrible night. With the donations that kept coming and a grant from a foundation supporting crime victims, we established the Morrison Sanctuary. Half the acreage still produces corn and soybeans, but the other half became a healing space for women recovering from predatory relationships. We built small cabins where women could stay for free while rebuilding their lives. Sarah designed a therapy program combining traditional counseling with animal-assisted healing. Horses, dogs, And even some chickens became co-therapists for women learning to trust again. There's something about caring for a creature that depends on you that helps repair the parts of yourself someone else broke. The old barn site of so much trauma was transformed into a community center, where Bradley had demanded my farm in front of 200 guests support groups now meet weekly. Women share their stories, recognize the patterns, and learn to spot the red flags that love bombing can hide. Sarah leads many of these sessions, her experience making her a lighthouse for others navigating similar storms. The gift of a predator, she tells new arrivals, is that surviving one gives you radar for life. You'll never be fooled the same way again. 3 years after the wedding, Sarah met Tom Hensley at a farmer's market. He was a high school agriculture teacher buying vegetables for a classroom project. Their courtship was the opposite of Bradley's whirlwind romance. Slow, careful, transparent. Tom understood why Sarah needed to verify his employment, why she Googled him extensively, why meeting his family mattered. He never rushed her, never pushed for more than she could give. "He's boring in the best way," Sarah told me after their first year together. "No grand gestures, no overwhelming charm, just steady, consistent kindness. He shows up when he says he will. His stories never change. His family actually knows him. It's wonderful." They married last spring in a simple ceremony in the apple orchard behind the farmhouse. 20 guests, all people who'd known us for years. No strangers, no hired actors, no hidden agendas. Tom's vows included a promise to respect the journey that had brought Sarah to him, scars and all. There wasn't a dry eye when they kissed under the blossoming trees. The farm thrives now in ways I never imagined. The Morrison Sanctuary has helped over 300 women rebuild their lives. Some stay for weeks, others for months. They work the land, tend the animals, and slowly remember who they were before someone tried to erase them. Social workers refer clients from across the Midwest. We've had visitors from as far as Japan, women who read about our story and needed to see proof that survival was possible. I still work the fields every morning, though Tom helps with the heavy lifting now. Sarah runs the sanctuary programs while maintaining her veterinary practice. We've hired full-time counselors, a program director, and security staff who ensure our guests feel safe. The main house stays busy with children's laughter again. Tom and Sarah welcomed twin girls last year, named after both their grandmothers. Sometimes I stand where Bradley slapped me in the barn, now marked by a plaque reading, "The spot where truth defeated lies." It reminds me that evil can dress well, speak smoothly, and promise everything while planning destruction. But it also reminds me that preparation instinct and the courage to act can defeat even the most sophisticated predator. Phoenix Security still sends Rebecca Stone to speak at our annual fundraiser. She shares updates on similar cases. They've investigated the patterns that repeat the ways predators adapt their tactics. Last year, she brought news that made Sarah cry, using evidence from Bradley's case they'd identified, and stopped 2 other men running similar schemes. Lives saved because we'd refused to let shame silence us. The families of Bradley's victims became extended family to us. Ruth Holbrook visits every Christmas bringing cookies and stories of her sister Patricia. David Chen funded a scholarship program for young women studying veterinary medicine in his Aunt Linda's memory. Even Jennifer Crosby, free now and rebuilding her life, sends donations to the sanctuary with notes of gratitude for the second chance she never gave her daughter. People often ask what I learned from almost losing everything to a con man in a designer suit. The answer changes depending on the day, but the core remains constant trust. Your instincts investigate before you invest, and never let anyone rush you into life-changing decisions. Love at first sight makes great poetry, but terrible legal documents. More importantly, I learned that protecting your family sometimes means letting them see you fight. Sarah needed to witness her father standing up to a bully, refusing to be intimidated, choosing justice over peaceful surrender. She needed to see that being kind doesn't mean being weak, that age doesn't equal helplessness, and that some things are worth defending even when it costs you everything. The farm means more to me now than just land and legacy. It's become a symbol of resilience, a place where broken people come to heal, where the soil that almost got stolen now nurtures new growth. Every woman who leaves here stronger than she arrived is a victory over predators like Bradley, who see vulnerability as opportunity. I'm getting older, that's true. Someday I won't be able to work these fields. But I know now that the real inheritance I'm leaving isn't measured in acres or assets. It's in the sanctuary that will outlive me, the daughter who survived to help others, the granddaughters who'll grow up knowing their worth isn't determined by their willingness to trust blindly. Bradley thought he was stealing a farm. Instead, he created something he'd hate more than prison, a place where his kind of evil gets exposed, examined, and defeated daily. Where women learn to recognize the Bradley Ashworths of the world before they can strike. Where love gets redefined, not as overwhelming passion that demands immediate surrender, but as steady respect that honors boundaries and builds slowly on truth. Sometimes the greatest justice isn't just putting the bad guy in jail, it's taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and transforming it into hope for others. It's refusing to let evil have the last word. It's dancing at your daughter's real wedding surrounded by genuine friends on land that stayed in the family, despite the devil's best efforts to steal it. So, I'll ask you this. Have you ever had someone try to take advantage of your trust, or your family's trust? How did you handle it? What warning signs do you wish you'd paid attention to sooner? Share your story in the comments below, because every experience shared might help someone else recognize danger before it's too late. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to hear more about how ordinary people overcome extraordinary challenges. Share this with anyone who might need a reminder that manipulation disguised as love is still manipulation, and that it's never too late to fight back against those who would prey on our kindness. Thank you for listening to our story. Remember, the best con artists don't look like criminals. They look like everything you've ever wanted. Stay suspicious of perfection, trust your gut when something feels wrong, and never let anyone rush you into risking what matters most. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your assets protected. Not everyone who claims to love you has your best interests at heart, but that doesn't mean real love doesn't exist. It just means it's worth taking the time to verify which one you're dealing with. May you find partners who support your dreams, instead of stealing them family who stands by you when truth needs telling, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the courage to see clearly, even when the view isn't pretty. Stay strong, stay smart, and above all, stay true to the instincts that evolution gave you for a reason. From my family farm to wherever you're listening, remember, trust but verify. Love but protect. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time.